All right, Doug, good morning. We are back with questions from members of the file, as well as some interesting news that's worth talking about. The first question actually isn't a question. It's from a guy who's a member of Crisis Investing who said he wanted to thank you rather than ask a question. He said, the last time that we spoke, we mentioned the uranium stock picks that would be available for premium members. I understood directly that this wasn't just a sales pitch for the membership, but that it would contain imminently actionable information. So I went over and signed up for that membership. Of the 3 picks which were provided, I could only buy 2 because I'm in Europe. So I bought the 2 stocks which were available here. And unbelievably enough, for the about 8K which I put in, the profit since then has doubled my membership fee. Now I know that past performance is no guarantee of future results, but please thank Doug for those stock picks. So there you go, Doug. A good thank you from a member.
Well, I appreciate that, of course. Everybody likes kudos more than slings and arrows, no question. But I think that uranium remains the place to be, one of the places that you should be, for all kinds of reasons that we've discussed. But I think most recently, this dust up between the Ukraine and Russia, the Russians are who supply, I think, something on the order of a quarter of the uranium that U.S. power plants use, are going to cut off supplies of uranium to the U.S. So it's going to put pressure on the domestic uranium market, and it's going to go higher for that, among other reasons. So I'm glad you made money. I've made money, the stocks I own. Why should I recommend something that I don't own? So
And that's what you get when if you're a subscriber to Crisis Investing, you get basically picks that Doug owns delivered there. And we have a free report for uranium. If you go to Crisis Investing, you can sign up and get that report for free. And of course, if you subscribe to the newsletter, you get a lot more.
And I have no doubt that at some point we're going to make a stupid mistake, because resource stocks are just risky by their very nature. But I think we're in a bull market for this kind of stuff. So good. That's good to hear. I'm very happy on several different levels.
All right. So the first actual question
and in these days, we like to see happiness wherever we can get it or find it.
I know this is great to get this one this morning. So the next one is, do you think that buying expensive gold watches and or jewelry makes sense for quietly moving smaller amounts of money internationally while still having the assets in their person? Or is it better to have the quarter-ounce gold coins that you mentioned previously?
That's a very interesting question, because Rolexes, I guess in particular, are like a cult object. I personally hate Rolexes. They keep crappy time. They're heavy and clunky and way, way overpriced, but they're a cult item. And they have kind of international market value. So that's actually a shrewd observation. Because, you take a gold Rolex of the upper strata, I guess it's worth at least $10,000. Okay, that's helpful. And another thing you can do along those lines is gold jewelry, the kind that Mr. T wears. That's right, just heavy gold jewelry that's like 24 karat gold. And in India, I know that the Indians are famous for importing and exporting things illegally, like gold. The customs officers have been advised when somebody's wearing a lot of gold jewelry, no, that's a no-no, Sahib, you can't do that. But listen, it goes further than that. It's like diamonds. I'm not a fan of diamonds either for all kinds of reasons. But people have always used diamonds that way. But wait a minute, this is why we have Bitcoin. I mean, it's much more portable than diamonds or Rolexes. And the amount that you can carry is, and you don't have to worry about the ask spread. So I think Bitcoin solves that problem pretty much, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Yeah, if you want some diversification, I'm not a big fan of, gold jewelry, but I guess that's not a bad way to go if you want to carry it across borders. But Bitcoin's better.
Yeah. I mean, I like to imagine myself as Mr. T, but I don't
I'd
think
love to see that. I'd love to see it.
I couldn't do the mohawk to start with.
Yeah, the big gold chain would go far. I think I'd like to see that. Okay, so next question is, do you know W.G. Hill? He made a lot of reports on being sovereign and investing abroad. Hill's very private, but I know he renounced his U.S. citizenship. Does Doug have any stories or thoughts on this author?
Yeah, I've actually known him. I've known Bill for 40 years, something like that. And that's not his real name. Yeah, the last time I saw him is that he came to Cafajate and hung out for a week. And actually, believe it or not, I'm way behind on my emails. And it's funny that whoever is asking this question, because I get emails from him occasionally. I got one from him. I haven't read it yet. I'm
Hmm.
way behind. Yeah, he's kind of a wild and crazy guy, exotic. Uh, what can I say about him? Uh, I'm not sure there's anything I can say about him other than I've known him for a long time and hear from him occasionally.
And
But
he was a proponent of like the five flag strategy or something like that.
well, he didn't originate that. It was actually Harry Schultz that originated that. And I'm not even sure if he knew Harry or not. But I think Bill's still running around the world. His wife or his girlfriend is a Filipina, as I seem to recall. But who knows where he is or what he's doing? He's um, he's a strange bird. I mean, fun to have a conversation with, but I don't know what I can say, frankly.
Okay. All right. Next question is, I'd like to know if Doug has read or of if you've read or if you like the writings of John Steinbeck. He says, it's fiction, I know, but I feel his writing is full of wisdom. What do you think?
Yeah, I like Steinbeck. He's written about 24 novels. I read a couple of them. Which ones have I read? Of Mice and Men, and what's the other one?
Grapes
But
of Wrath?
yeah, yes, I read that too. And he specializes in Depression era poor people in California, basically Okies and people like that. And I think he's a very good writer. And the one book that he's written, well, there's several of his other books that he's written that I'd really kind of like to read because he is a good writer. Is Travels with Charlie,
Hmm.
uh, about his road trip up and down the US. And it's called Travels with Charlie because it turns out, I guess, Steinbeck, like myself, was a fancier of king poodles. That's who Charlie was. He was a big poodle. So he was kind of a leftist, and he hung out with all these leftist writers and stuff like that. And I'd say he was politically confused. But yeah, when it comes to, slices of life uh, among people that are down at the heels, yeah, but he's pretty good. I mean, what would he be like to sit down and have a drink with? Uh, he's got a lot of, you know, lefty, inchoate, poorly thought out political and philosophical values. But on the other hand, he's kind of a common sense guy. I get the impression. So
Hmm.
I'd like to go back to because they're good reads.
Yeah, I only read Grapes of Wrath because it was a requirement in high school, but and I didn't like it because it was forced upon us that way. But I do
Yeah,
remember it very well written.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, Ernest Hemingway, and I don't know. You can probably put like Norman Mailer in a class with him. They're all there. In fact, I think the best novel, well, one of the best that I've ever read was by Norman Mailer, the one that made him famous, The Naked and the Dead. I mean, I had a hard time putting it down. It's a World War II novel about the Marines in the South Pacific. Really well done. I mean,
The stuff that gives you nightmares, if I recall.
it was. So there's a whole crew of, American writers that were writing from the 30s to the 50s, 60s, and they're all lefties, but doesn't mean that they're not good, worthwhile reads.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
Heming, of course, same genre with all these guys.
Okay. Next question is, the Netherlands is facing a unique situation with the closure of the Groningen gas field coinciding with the global energy crisis. How do you see this impacting the Dutch economy and its security in the short and long term?
The answer is badly. I mean, Europe is a civilization in collapse. And it's funny, because I was talking the other day with a chap who, an interesting background and one of the many things we agreed about is that it's all over for Europe because the Europeans generally are, everything they do is stupid and destructive and it's like they're performing ritual acts of self-mutilation in that continent. It's horrible. And within another generation, unless there's a radical change, and I think it's gone beyond the point of no return, they're so weak and degraded and confused philosophically. The place is going to become part of the caliphate. It really is.
Well, it says here, so they're apparently planning to close the field on October 1st. And
I'm sorry I went off on a tangent about how horrible Europe is. And yes, that's another indication. That's another nail in the coffin, as it were. And the reason that the Dutch give out, I'm given to understand, is that the withdrawal of the gas is causing earthquakes. And yes, that's what happens when you take a big oil or gas field and the earth subsides, and yeah, there's little earthquakes that result. Okay, but is that a reason to freeze in the dark? I think not.
yeah, I think they're going to regret it. Not only does it produce a lot of the gas that they need in Europe, but also apparently it's been very profitable for the country. I mean, it says that gas profits have delivered an estimated 363 billion euros to the Dutch treasury since production started in the 1960s. So they're going to lose a lot of income and they're going to lose access to the energy they need.
Yeah, and typical of the Europeans, of course, the Dutch weren't part of this. When I presume the Americans, complicit with who else, blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, I mean, there's been no investigation or criminal prosecution to find out who actually did it. So they're just rolling over, and you can't produce anything, you can't mine anything, you can't even have cows because they're flatulent, which is one of the most stupid things. I mean, these people are gripped by mass hysteria, and this is just one more of many, many examples like this. Now, Europe is fucked. That's all over, man. Game over for Europe. Smart Europeans are getting the hell out of Dodge. You go, well, let's stay and fight. Well, okay, that's okay, but the great tide of history is against you at this point. Yeah, I hope some people stay and fight and turn it around. But, if you're smart, you'll, like a lot of people I'm meeting, they're getting the hell out of Europe and they're coming to South America, especially Argentina at this particular point.
Yeah.
God, it feels so good intellectually to have been right. Finally.
Well, all right. One last question. We'll get to some news. It says recent reports indicate that the U.S. military pier off of Gaza carries a hefty price tag of 320 million. Given this significant cost, how does the Pentagon justify this project, especially considering its temporary structure? What's this thing for, do you think? This pier?
This is worthy of an investigative reporter digging into it. How do you spend 320 million? What kind of a pier is this going to be? That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
And, and for what? Just to what are they going to ship in by boat? Because if it's just a question of food for the starving Gazans, which is none of our business anyway, you fly it in, frankly.
Or you drive it over the Egypt border, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Or Biden's good buddies with Netanyahu, or maybe you drive it in from Israel. I mean, frankly. So what do they really need a pier for? Are they going to ship things out? Like it's been suggested that what are they going to do with all those Gazans? And I've heard that the administration is floating proposals that the U.S. needs like a million more radical Muslim immigrants. Nothing wrong with the U.S., but a million more radical Muslims can't cure. Yeah, bring them on. Maybe that's what. But I don't know if you even need a pier for that, because they fly these people in. I mean, look, they flew in 200,000 Somalis by air, not by boat. What the hell do you need a pier for?
Well, there's no airport around there. And if they're the way they, like, my thought is that they have these people corralled in a relatively small area. They don't have access, they could basically move south by land into Egypt, but Egypt doesn't want to deal with that. And and obviously Israel wants them gone. I think that's clear. And
For
that
sure.
as soon as they announced this pier being built and the cost of it, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I think they're shipping people out. I think they're going to load them up on ships and get them out. And it's probably the only efficient way to evacuate them from that area, which, Israel will make impossible to survive, I think, in. And as a humanitarian effort would be to pull them out, to take them. And the U.S. will probably take most of them.
Yeah, where is Seymour Hersh when we need him? What the hell is going on? This is another 300 and if they say 327 million, it's probably going to be more like $1 billion, which is money the US government doesn't have. They'll just print it up. This is actually totally insane. I mean, it makes no sense at all. It's crazy.
One of many things in the news like that. And speaking of people that are insane and responsible for money, there's this clip that's going around on Twitter with Jared Bernstein, who is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors for Biden. I think it's worth sharing. So let me share my screen 1 second. Okay, here we go. You see genius at work here. You'll love it.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to, yeah, I guess I'm just, I can't really talk, I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about, like, because it's like the government clearly prints money, it does it all the time, and it clearly borrows, otherwise we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
Nothing confusing there, Doug. He doesn't seem confused at all. What do you think?
I don't think that he's on any kind of drug or controlled substance. I think this guy he's just abysmally ignorant. He knows nothing about economics. He doesn't understand. And he's the head of the Council of Economic Advisors to Biden.
Yep.
I mean, this actually beggars belief. It's like this guy is he trying to qualify for Saturday Night Live to do a skit? Because that's what it is. I mean, it's the head of the economic advisors literally, manifestly doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't even know. That's why he can't explain anything. This is nuts. And that silly bitch that was interviewing him, who was she?
Yeah. So I don't know her name, but this is the whole thing. This guy, they're setting this up. She is pitching MMT. She's pitching, instead of, us going into debt, basically, to get money and going into debt, printing the dollars that way. She wants us to just inject the money directly into the system. So this guy looks like a fool. He is a fool, but the solution she's offering is basically something totally, she's offering MMT as a solution.
Which is even worse. And what is MMT? It's basically an economic philosophy where the government prints up money and injects it where it thinks is a good idea. And then if there's too much inflation, how do you get the money out of the society? You tax selectively other places that you don't want. So this is, other than a regime of pure communism, this is the worst possible economic solution to any problems. The government prints up money, gives it to people it wants. If there's too much money in the society and inflation goes up, they take it out by taxing other people that they don't want. That's the essence of MMT.
Well, and what they really want to do, I think, is connect that to CBDCs, which then they wouldn't necessarily have to tax. They just put restrictions on your ability to spend, or they could expire your money over time. Like they can really get in there and really micromanage everything perfectly.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's going to become obvious to more people that we're really just cattle. And some of us are feedlot cattle, and others are free-range cattle. But even if you're free-range, you're still a cow that gets rounded up. You're part of a herd that the government's monitoring. I mean, this is actually criminal, in addition to being stupid. I mean, the standard of living with these people in control is actually going to go into collapse. I couldn't be more gloomy about the kind of people that are running the world today.
Yeah, and it's not just the people in government. So let me share one other clip about this that is kind of amusing, at least. This is Jim Cramer grilling the new Starbucks CEO. Maybe not so new, but he's the guy that's in charge now. And I don't like Jim Cramer, but this guy's pretty awful. So let me share this clip real quick.
I'm concerned with linked quarter, why you had not the occasional, but the hardcore drop off.
Jim, if you look at the most loyal customers, they actually continue to come in, they continue to buy as frequently, they continue to customize and upgrade. It's at the tail of the loyalty program, particularly those that are, in the 90-day active, as we call it. The folks that didn't come back, They, again, are very similar to the occasional customers. We have an action plan in place right now to communicate directly with them with offers that have gone out even as recent as this week in order to ensure that we can reverse the visitation losses that we have seen with them and to bring them back. And yes, you're right. Overall program did grow by 6%.
Right, that's necessary. But what's more important, I think, is the linked quarter decline. Now, let me, before I turn it over to my colleagues, you said it's not business as usual, and I want to make a point here, sir. You are still expanding as if it is business as usual. You had, for instance, on the quarter, you talk about opening stores in Honduras and Ecuador. Is it not time to pause, sir, and figure out what's really going wrong and spend a deep dive and making it so that this decline in comp store numbers does not continue? Because it is perilous to the actual existential existence of Starbucks.
Jim, thank you for the question. What I would tell you is, if you look across the world, our system sales in Latin America expanded double digits. Our sales in Japan expanded double digits. Our business outside of Malaysia and Indonesia in Asia Pacific showed growth. If you look at the U.S. business and look at the fundamentals of the U.S. business, we are holding share in the U.S. We are still the largest player in out-of-home coffee. If you look at some of the metrics that we have...
Tim Horton said you were not holding share, sir. I regard them as being seminal companies that are just as good when it comes to... McDonald's says you are losing share. I can't go against those three companies. They are too good and too honest and too big for me to dismiss.
We are the leading category player in coffee. I'm talking visitation share and what we have. If you look at our in-home coffee business, it grew share 140 basis points. But if you look at the business underpinning us, tea grew 8%. Cold grew 1%. So there are elements in here. If you look at our partner sentiment and what we have inside stores, attrition is down to its lowest levels. So there's work going in. The thing we didn't do enough of is really attack the occasional customer with delivering and communicating value to them in a more aggressive manner. That's what the plan we have does.
All right. So this whole segment was basically, I think, like 10 minutes long. So it was much longer than that. But there's a lot of things. There's a couple points. Number one, Starbucks is expensive, and it shows that the consumer is suffering with all the inflation, and despite all the calls of the economy, the Bidenomics is working and everyone's thriving. I think it's a sign that it's not. But then there's also a question about leadership in general when you see this guy in that company, and I think it relates to the government problems we see.
Yeah, this guy, it's amazing. This guy is a consummate bullshit artist. He's just using buzzwords, talking about communicating with the customer. Wait a minute, what does that have to do with a good cup of coffee at a reasonable price? I've hated Starbucks for a long time. And the fact that they've installed this person from the subcontinent, which is not a part of the world, which is known for ethical values. I mean, he thinks that by passing out some glib words, some raparoo, I was proud of Cramer, who I generally dislike, actually trying to pin this slimy character down. Good for Cramer. I mean, I never thought I'd be saying that.
I know.
But, no, this is amazing. And this guy is exactly the type of guy that would roll over to PC, and he's inviting all these vagrants and bums into their restrooms. I mean, I don't want to use a Starbucks for a lot of reasons, but not least of them is that they have all these really objectionable people that are using it as a gathering point, and they're not kicked out. So
yeah, their corporate activism and like their trans LGBT stuff. Even we were in a Starbucks in Montevideo last week, and they had these big banners out front for trans in Uruguay. I mean, we're promoting trans stuff. So like that woke agenda is a big part of what he's doing. And, you know, of course, all kinds of things going wrong. And, you know, even his very excellent body language, which is with his constant hand steepling, didn't win me over. I don't know. The guy's an ex-McKinsey consultant, which isn't much of a surprise.
yes, I hate corporate suits, and I hate consultants especially. And I'll further point out something that is kind of disturbing, which I don't know what the statistics would show, but all over the upper levels of corporate America, people from the subcontinent have become the CEOs and top executives. And this is not a good trend. I would say that it's similar to what happened in the Roman Empire after it had reached its peak, where it's just a fact that actual Romans from Rome and from Italy were not apparent anymore. There were people from the provinces that took over as emperors, as generals, and so forth. It's like the basic Romans that built Rome had lost their societal vitality. And the same thing is happening in the US. And I hate to say, make what would seem like a racist comment, but our friend Giant Bandari puts his finger on people from the subcontinent all too accurately. And I urge listeners to listen to Giant talk about his countrymen in India.
Yeah, no one can do it like he does.
No, he's great, and he's funny, inadvertently funny, but he's really a laugh riot.
It really is. It really is.
So
Yeah, it's growing
don't
trend.
use Starbucks. I like a cup of coffee, but that company is going to go into collapse for all kinds of reasons, not least of which is that the average guy is not going to spend $6 after-tax dollars for a cup of coffee as times get tough, when the place is a gathering point for junkies and, who are serving your coffee and vagrants who are using the bathroom. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I think so too. So next item was, I wanted to talk about this attack on Bitcoin that appears to have been launched last week by the feds. There are a lot of things that happened all in last week, and it seems like the timing of it, I think, is intentional. So we had Roger Ver was indicted for tax fraud. We have the Samurai Wallet founders were arrested and charged with money laundering. The Binance founder was sentenced to 4 months in prison for money laundering. And then, the FBI has this public service announcement that they send out, basically trying to scare people from associating with anything that's not a registered entity, I guess. So what do you make of all this action?
Yeah, it seems like it's too much to be coincidental, because it's said that there are no coincidences. And this would be an example of that. Like Roger Ver, for instance, who I know, not well, but certainly know him. And he renounced his US citizenship back in 2014. That's 10 years ago. And now, 10 years after the fact, they're going after him for phony baloney tax charges, which incidentally, traditionally under international law, is one of the things: political crimes, tax crimes, and religious crimes under well-acknowledged international law are the three things that are not extraditable under for those three categories of crime. So they've phonied up something with taxes where they're saying, lie. This is 10 years ago, for God's sake. So that's indicative. They called Roger the Bitcoin Jesus, and he's supposed to have, what, 70,000 Bitcoins is what they're saying that he owns now.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. That's about, what is that, about $400 million or something? I don't know. I'm not doing the math in my head. Anyway, that's bad. And then this other chap, the Chinese guy,
CZ.
CZ, right. He's not a US citizen, doesn't live in the US. Everything's outside of the US. And he was living in Dubai. He's a dual Chinese-Canadian national, I believe. And he's turned himself in to the US government to serve 4 months for doing what, frankly? Just as far as I can tell, just conducting business, except the US government doesn't think that he adequately cleared the people. This is very, very bad.
Yeah, he said in the Justice Department statement, it said U.S. Justice Department officials said that CZ created a company culture in which Binance's growth was prioritized over compliance with U.S. financial rules. By serving American customers without proper controls in place, funds linked to virtual theft and terrorism were able to flow through Binance undetected.
Yeah, linked. I mean, thanks for your opinion, Justice Department people, but this is a non-American company with a non-American executive that they've roped in and is going to serve time and pay a gigantic fine. He's worth $45 billion. So it's not going to change what he has for breakfast tomorrow morning. But this is part of, the US government has metastasized and thinks that it controls the world, which is odd at the very time when it's manifestly bankrupt and is going into collapse. It's actually trying to control the whole world. It's perverse.
Yeah, and it seemed like they were just trying to scare people last week with all this stuff, rolling it out at the same time. And Bitcoin did take a big hit. I mean, it was down to, I don't know, get on like 56,000 or something like that. But it's has rebounded a bit, and it's almost at 62,000 again.
Yeah, it makes you feel like no matter who you are, anywhere in the world, that you're really just a member of a herd that's being hunted by predators, which is the case.
Yeah, with both McAfee and Roger Ver were grabbed in Spain. So I think if Spain is on your list of destinations to spend your time, I think I would take it off.
I'd take Europe off the list, quite frankly. Actually, from that point of view, in Latin America, you're best off in Brazil and becoming a Brazilian citizen, which you can do if you, I understand, I have to check out the details. If you adopt a Brazilian child, because there's lots of, kids that don't have families there, after a year, and Brazil doesn't have extradition. Of course, on the other hand, extradition doesn't matter that much anymore because the US agents will talk to agents of whatever country and they'll phony something up so that they'll ship you out. And
Right.
no,
Yeah. I mean, we even had that thing was it with Peru or Ecuador? I think it was Peru, where they went into the Mexican embassy, right, to nab a guy, an ex-vice president.
oh yes, that's right. Yeah. And well, this is happening all over. It's like the Israelis destroyed an Iranian consulate in, where was that? Was that in Lebanon?
It was in Syria.
Yeah, exactly. The world is actually becoming quite lawless. Even these states are not observing professional courtesy between each other.
Right. It's gang violence. They're all gangs, and now they're going at war with each other, it seems, and we're stuck in the middle of it.
And I've held for years that you don't get the best and the brightest, as Robert McNamara idiotically said back in the 60s going into government. You get the worst and the most criminally oriented people that rise to the top of government. And this is further proof of that, I think.
Yeah, as is the next item, which is this bill that was passed by Congress, the Antisemitism Awareness Act. It's designed to provide the consideration of a definition of anti-Semitism set forth by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance for the enforcement of federal anti-discrimination laws concerning education programs or activities and for other purposes. So what do you think about this thing that they passed late one night?
I think it's really disturbing that a certain class of people are being set aside as a special protected class where you dare not say anything that might be deemed to be unfriendly, even in a joking way, to Jews. I mean, look, I'm all for Jews. I'm all for everybody, but this is crazy because once you can't say anything about one group of people, that opens the door to not being able to say anything about any other group of people or being able to say anything at all, quite frankly. So it's a further what they're doing here is they're trying to outlaw free speech generally. And this seems like a good way to get the camel under the tent. Hate speech.
Yeah. Hate speech. And the interesting thing though is that they outsourced the definition to this NGO. It's they aren't defining in the law what anti-Semitism is. They're saying that by law, we're going to use this organization's working definition. Working implies evolving definition of what anti-Semitism is. And the bullet points on their website that describe it are things like, if you suggest that the Jews were involved in the death of Jesus, that's anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and this has all kinds of other implications. It's been said, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Jew either, I'm not a religious person, but it seems like there's a subtle war being conducted against Christianity, which is because it's a traditional value, and these people actually want to overturn anything that looks like a Western tradition. And Christianity is part of that, of course.
Mm.
It's very disturbing. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, this would really make the New Testament a problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. Who would have guessed that this would happen? It's funny. That was one of the few flaws in the movie V for Vendetta, which was a great movie. It's that they had the Koran being outlawed. Well, I'm extremely anti-Islamic for all kinds of reasons. But it seems like the New Testament is in more danger of being outlawed with things like this.
Yeah. Well, you know that the election this year is on the 5th of November, don't you? Do you know that?
I didn't know that. Oh, that makes sense. Wow. Remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot. I will never be forgot. I don't have the exact run. Guy Fawkes Day. And maybe it'll be just like in the movie on Guy Fawkes Day with.
Could be. I thought it was interesting. This is such an interesting election.
That's a happy coincidence. The U.S. elections on Guy Fawkes Day. A happy coincidence, I'd say. Except after that, we'll get something even worse.
I think so.
It's funny how life is imitating art.
It really is. I mean, it's wild times. So one of the things we talk about the necessity of having permanent residency in other places and having a second passport. And I think that the situation that's occurring with Ukrainians who have left Ukraine, maybe ones who've been out of there for a long time and working in other countries, I think makes the point extremely well. And that is Ukraine abandoned, they stopped offering consular services to Ukrainians living abroad. So they can no longer get passports renewed or other documents they might need in order to maintain their residency. And so when those things expire and everything has an expiration date on it, they will be forced to return to Ukraine, and I'm sure promptly sent to the front.
Yeah, either before or after being punished or fined. So it's increasingly amazing that the U.S. is supporting the Ukraine. I mean, there's a government that's totally unworthy of any kind of support. It's been turned into a police state, actually, by that little creep Zelensky, who's probably worth $1 billion right now. The Panama Papers showed that he was worth several $100 million at the time that they were, and nobody says anything about that. Where's a second-rate actor? How's he wind up from a backwater country with a couple $100 million? This is all crazy suspicious. And giving $60 billion to these people, the war is totally lost. So where's that money going? And anyway, at best, it's going to prolong the war unnecessarily, which just means hundreds of thousands more young Ukrainians and Russians are going to be killing each other because of this money that the U.S. I mean, this is worthy of Nuremberg type trials, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's really awful. And I think as of at some point this month, Zelensky's term as president runs out, but being the democracy they are, they suspended elections because it's an emergency situation.
They'd never talk about that on CNN or MSNBC. Well, I guess if we have a real emergency here in the U.S., that's a good, since Ukraine is like the 51st state of the U.S., it's a viable precedent for why we should suspend elections here in the U.S.
Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be wild this summer as well, and it doesn't seem like it's gonna be it seems like it might be a BLM type summer, another summer of love with these protests on campuses.
Yeah, they're kind of an overture to the main course, which is coming this summer. After all, summertime is traditionally when you have riots in the streets. So fire up your version of the Stone Street Fighting Man and put it on continuous loop.
Yeah, exactly. And I sent a couple of documents to you actually, where I found these manuals that are circulated about how to go to these demonstrations and how to prepare. One of them is kind of a cutesy one where they use like bunnies and cats in it, and animations in this little pamphlet. But it actually supplies people with actually useful tactics for how to show up, how to, for operational security, how not to be identified, operating in cells, like how to take advantage of targets of opportunity, getting together after to have an after action review, which you do in any military engagement, to make sure to compare notes and make adjustments. And one is a much more, I think, sinister one, which is longer and more detailed. But these things are actively circulating among these people. They are organized, and they are, although there's a lot of like, dumb people at these things, that are just, I think, useful idiots that are participating in these protests. And there are people who are obviously justifiably unhappy with what's happening in Gaza, understand that. But then it's being infiltrated by these Antifa types who are given a lot of direction about what to do and effectively cause disruption.
Yeah, there is a certain class of people that are aided and abetted by college professors and indoctrinated college students that just want to create chaos. And I think they're going to get what they want, quite frankly.
Yeah. It's an interesting flashpoint though, because this that going back to the anti-Semitism legislation and then sending all this money to Israel and the pier there, and then you had right before there was this crackdown on these campuses. It hasn't happened on all of them, but it's on several. I think there's like 2,000 or so college students or people participating that have been arrested so far in it. You have Bibi Netanyahu coming out and talking about that something must be done. And then while there was no crackdown of the BLM stuff, there was a real crackdown here so far. What do you think of that?
I think we live in interesting times. And it's not like it's going to be all over after the new president is installed, who I suspect is going to be a Democrat. That's the way I'm betting right now. Not because he'll win the election, but because he'll appear to win. This is just warming up, because we have yet to go through the financial collapse and the economic collapse and the ongoing military collapse abroad and political chaos and social chaos. I mean, the migrants are still coming in at the rate of 10,000 a day on a good day. Yeah. Where are they going to put all those people? I keep asking myself, God, I should have looked at investing in tent making stocks. Are they putting them all in tents? Have they run out of Motel 6s or Four Seasons, for all I know, where they can put these people?
Yeah, I know in Denver, they just bought a hotel. The city bought a hotel for housing migrants.
Wise investment, I'm sure. the thing is probably going to have to be demolished after they move out, if they move out ever. It's actually so bizarre. I actually am kind of can't wait to get back to the U.S. Well, I don't have to wait to get back to the U.S. I want to see this movie, Civil War. You haven't seen that yet, have you?
No, no, it is in the theaters here, but I haven't gone to see it yet. I'd like to see it.
From what I hear, it's probably pretty accurately predictive of the way this thing could come down, because it won't be a civil war like from 1861 to 65, which wasn't a real civil war anyway. It was a secession movement that went bad. Yeah, this is going to get out of control. Well, I hope I'm wrong. I mean,
Yeah, but I don't think you are.
no, it's too bad. Well, it is gratifying being right, though. I mean, that's important.
All right, one last news item that I think is worthy of mention is this chart I sent you. It shows young male virginity on the rise. I didn't realize this was only through 2018, but it says that since the share of men under 30 who report 0 female sex partners since they turned 18, in 2008 it was 8%. A decade later, it was 27%. I can only imagine how high it must be now.
That's a disturbing number, because if there's one thing that at least I always thought young men were really interested in, it was going out and getting laid. Frankly, I mean, so what's going on here? I mean, on the one hand, maybe young males are, they say, low in testosterone, or maybe they hate women, but maybe they should, because when you look at what's happening to young females, they're all psychologically unbalanced, which they display with piercings and crazy leftist ideas and converting to Islam, which is double disturbing. Yeah, maybe, listen, maybe if I was a young, well, not me, but I can see why a lot of young males actually don't want to go out and associate with females.
Yeah, it's shocking though, because it's hard. The social dynamics that engineered this outcome, that huge change in the last decade, it's a profound change that occurred. I mean, lots of factors must be coming together to cause this, because this doesn't make any sense.
This whole
shocking.
thing with being transgender and LBGQ and all these other things is related to this fact.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's all since 2008. Like, I think the first time I saw, I think it must have been 2012 or 2013. So it was during Obama's presidency. I remember being in Germany and seeing, it was during June. And so it was Gay Pride Month, and they had a gay pride flag on the US Embassy there as we walked by. And I thought, what is going on? Like, why would we be flying that at a US Embassy? And so
Yeah.
it's just this, there's so many social decaying elements that are happening and converging at the same time.
Yeah, further proof that Western civilization is in collapse. And how do you stop, once something starts to collapse, how do you stop it from collapsing? Well, it's like when a building is rotten, its foundations are disintegrating. You almost can't stop it collapsing. You have to let it collapse and see what's left and rebuild. But, you know, I miss the good old days with Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best and Happy Days.
Yeah, the optimistic view of the future.
Yes,
Yes.
it was nice. It was nice when you had a world where everybody wanted to have well, not particularly a 59, well, let me use this car as the model. A 1959 Cadillac convertible, Eldorado. I mean, yes, okay, that's the late 50s, but that's like the epitome of opulence, extravagance, of the American dream realized, with the Beach Boys song playing on the radio. But
It's all
no
long
more.
gone.
Yeah,
All long gone.
That's ancient history. That's with the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it here for today, Doug, and we'll be back next week with more. So thank you so much.
There'll be plenty of amusing stuff that'll happen in between now and then.
No doubt about that. All right. Talk to you then.
Thanks, Matt.